The words landed like a quiet thunderclap. "We're going with Sophie for the VP position." James Carter, CEO of Horizon Innovations, delivered the news with the ease of someone ordering coffee at Pike Place Market. But for me, Laura Bennett, 48 years old, single mother of two, and a 25-year cornerstone of this Seattle tech firm, those words stole the air from the room. My chest tightened. I'm Laura Bennett, 48, mother of Ellie, 21, and Noah, 19, both in college, raised mostly alone after my ex-husband, Mark, decided fatherhood clashed with his entrepreneurial soul. Career woman who believed that excellence was a shield, a guarantee that hard work would always be rewarded. Fool who thought 25 years of loyalty to Horizon Innovations would mean something. That morning, I'd walked along Pike Place Market, the salty Puget Sound breeze mingling with the aroma of fresh coffee. My journal open in my lap as I scribbled hopes for today. The VP role wasn't just a title. It was validation, proof that every sacrifice, missed recitals, late-night emails, years of putting Horizon first had been worth it. Now, that journal felt like a museum piece, a relic of a woman who still believed in fairness. Horizon wasn't always the polished, heartless machine it had become. When I joined at 23, fresh from the University of Washington with a marketing degree and student loans that felt like chains, it was a scrappy startup tucked above a Fremont diner. 12 of us, fueled by ambition and cheap coffee, pitching ideas through the smell of sizzling burgers. I was hired as a junior account coordinator, but by 26, I was closing deals solo, charming clients with persistence and grit. By 30, I'd landed accounts that turned Horizon from a local outfit into a regional powerhouse. By 40, my client portfolio was worth $250 million a year, the lifeblood of the company's growth. Somewhere in those years, I built a life. Got married. Had Ellie and Noah. Got divorced when Mark left for his yoga instructor, claiming I was too consumed by work. Through it all, Horizon was my constant, my anchor, the place where I proved I could be more than a single mom with a broken heart. I thrived there, pouring my soul into every project, every client call, every late-night strategy session. 8 years ago, James Carter arrived as CEO, fresh from a glitzy San Francisco firm, with PowerPoints about disruption and youth culture. Overnight, our offices transformed. Nap pods, kombucha on tap, and an influx of 20-somethings who seemed to speak a different language. I adapted, learned TikTok for client pitches, traded my blazers for trendier cuts, worked harder, stayed later, never complained when younger colleagues were promoted into vague, high-paying roles. Play the long game, my friend Rachel, a Seattle life coach, urged over wine at Capitol Hill bistros. You own the client relationships, Laura. They can't take that away. How wrong we were. When the VP of Client Success announced his retirement, I saw my chance. I'd been doing half his job for years, managing crises, mentoring staff, earning trust from clients who asked for me by name. My performance reviews were flawless, my reputation ironclad. Then came Sophie Nguyen, Stanford MBA, former collegiate rower. Charismatic, with an effortless charm that filled rooms. James hired her as a senior strategist, started inviting her to leadership meetings within weeks. I trained her myself, shared my hard-earned contacts, my systems, my shortcuts, believing it proved my leadership, my readiness for the VP role. I was a team player after all. I thought it would show them I was indispensable. Instead, I sat in that boardroom, hearing I was too old, too rooted in the past. At 48, I was being shelved, my value reduced to a number my age that had nothing to do with my results. I drove home to my Capitol Hill apartment in a fog, unable to face Ellie, home from college for spring break. She'd texted, "Mom, did you get it?" with a string of hopeful emojis. I couldn't bear to tell her the truth, that her mother, who'd sacrificed so much for this company, was no longer valued. My face burned with a heat I hadn't felt since childhood, a raw, aching humiliation that made my hands tremble beneath the polished mahogany table. I sat in Horizon's sleek boardroom, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the misty Seattle skyline, a space where I'd pitched strategies that won over giants like Boeing and Microsoft. And yet, here I was, hearing that Sophie Nguyen, 29, with barely 6 months at the company, was taking the vice president of client success role. My role. That all those years of putting work first had led to this. I locked myself in my bathroom, stared at my reflection, the lines around my eyes, the gray I covered every 3 weeks, the slight softness under my chin that hadn't been there a decade ago. Is this what obsolescence looks like? I whispered to the mirror. But beneath the pain, something stirred. Not anger, not yet, but a quiet, stubborn spark. A refusal to let this moment define me. I pulled out my journal, the same one I'd carried since my early days at Horizon, when I'd sketch ideas in Fremont's dive bars, dreaming of a future I could shape. I wrote one sentence, my hand steady despite the ache in my chest. They don't get to decide my worth. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Friends, if this hits home, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Tell me where you're reading from. I never thought I'd bare my soul like this. But what happened next taught me that silence only shields the wrong people. Let's step back, to the days when Horizon was my everything, and to the moment I began to rebuild what they tried to break. The one I'd spent decades earning. I blinked, trying to steady myself, my blazers suddenly feeling like armor too heavy to bear. Why? I asked, my voice small, fragile, betraying the confidence I'd built over years of closing multi-million-dollar deals. I cleared my throat, forced strength into my words. James, my numbers are unmatched. I've led this department's growth for 25 years. I built our biggest accounts. He leaned back, tapping his sleek fountain pen against my performance review, a document that glowed with praise. Exceeded every target, transformed client relationships, mentored half the team. His smile was polite, practiced, never reaching his eyes. Laura, we know. Your dedication is the backbone of Horizon. But the board feels we need fresh energy, a new perspective. Sophie brings that spark, that disruptive edge our clients are hungry for. Disruptive edge. The phrase cut deeper than I expected, as if my decades of navigating tech's relentless evolution were somehow dull, outdated. I'd learned every new platform, adapted to every trend, stayed late while my kids grew up without me, all to keep Horizon ahead. And now, at 48, I was being told I couldn't keep up. Sophie's been here 6 months? I said, my voice low, barely masking the crack in my composure. I trained her. I built those client relationships from scratch. James leaned forward, his tone softening, like he was offering me a consolation prize. It's not personal, Laura. The tech landscape moves fast. Sophie aligns with where we're headed, with the future our clients expect. The future. As if I, with my 25 years of hard-won expertise, wasn't part of it. As if my crow's feet, visible on Zoom calls, disqualified me from leading. I nodded. Mechanical, my body moving on autopilot while my mind reeled. I stood, legs unsteady, and walked out of the boardroom, past the open plan office where colleagues glanced up, then quickly away, their silence louder than any words. Past Sophie's desk, where she sat, already updating her email signature to Vice President of Client Success, her confidence as bright as the Seattle sun breaking through the clouds. I felt their eyes on me, a mix of pity and discomfort, and I kept my chin high, even as something inside me crumbled. The sting of that boardroom rejection lingered like Seattle's winter fog, heavy and unrelenting. As I drove home from Horizon Innovations, past the neon glow of Pike Place Market, my mind drifted back to the beginning, to the days when this company was more than a paycheck. It was my purpose. I'm Laura Bennett, 48, single mother of Ellie and Noah, and for 25 years, I poured my soul into Horizon, building a legacy that transformed a scrappy startup into a tech powerhouse. Through divorce, single parenthood, and endless deadlines, Horizon was my constant. I poured myself into it, believing that excellence would protect me. I led teams through tech bubbles and recessions, built trust with clients who called me at midnight with crises, and mentored colleagues who became friends. I started attending Seattle's tech meetups, initially feeling out of place among 20-somethings in hoodies. But I learned their language: AI, blockchain, UX, adding it to my arsenal. My journal filled with notes from those nights, ideas for pitches, reflections on resilience. Keep growing, I wrote after one meetup. They can't outrun your experience. Everything changed 8 years ago when James Carter arrived as CEO. Fresh from a San Francisco firm, he brought a vision of disruption and youth culture. Our Fremont office was gutted, replaced with a sleek downtown space, open-plan desks, nap pods, kombucha on tap. The average employee age seemed to drop a decade overnight. Job postings emphasized digital natives and startup vibes, words that felt like coded rejections of my generation. I adapted, again. I traded my classic blazers for trendier cuts, learned TikTok for client campaigns, stayed later to prove I could keep up. I never complained when younger colleagues were promoted into vague, high-paying roles like innovation catalyst. My friend Rachel, a life coach who'd seen me through divorce and doubt, urged me over wine at Capitol Hill bistros. Play the long game, Laura. Your clients are your power. They can't replace that. I believed her. I believed in Horizon. When the VP of Client Success announced his retirement, I saw my moment. I'd been doing half his job for years, managing crises, mentoring staff, earning trust from clients who requested me by name. My performance reviews were flawless, my reputation a fortress. I'd even started a mentorship program, Informal Lunch and Learns, where I shared decades of insights with younger colleagues, including Sophie Nguyen. Sophie, with her Stanford MBA and rower's poise, arrived 6 months ago, hired by James as a senior strategist. I trained her, shared my contacts, my systems, my shortcuts, believing it showcased my leadership. I thought it proved I was ready to step into the VP role, to finally claim the recognition I'd earned. But as I parked outside my apartment, the boardroom's words echoed, "Sophie brings that spark." My sacrifices missed bedtimes, strained family dinners. Years of adapting to a company that kept moving the goalposts felt like offerings to a god that no longer listened. I couldn't face Ellie, home from college, her text still unanswered. "Mom, did you get it?" I sat in my car, the Seattle rain tapping my windshield, and opened my journal. I flipped past pages of victories deals closed, clients won, dreams sketched in hopeful ink. I wrote one line, my hand shaking not with defeat, but with a quiet, growing resolve. This isn't the end of my story. I thought back to a moment years ago, after a grueling client pitch. Exhausted, I'd walk to Cary Park, overlooking the city's twinkling lights, and promised myself I'd build a legacy that mattered. That promise still burned inside me, undimmed by James's dismissal, by Sophie's promotion, by a company that had forgotten my worth. Horizon had been my home. But homes can change, can betray. As I stepped out into the rain, my journal tucked under my arm, I felt the first stirrings of something new, not anger, but clarity. I'd built their empire with my hands, my heart, my time. If they couldn't see my value, I'd find a place that did. But every brick I laid in that foundation came at a cost. Personal sacrifices that now felt like open wounds. After James Carter, our CEO, chose Sophie Nguyen, a 29-year-old newcomer, for the vice president of client success role I'd earned, the dream I'd chased for decades was deferred. And as I gripped the steering wheel, I couldn't help but replay the journey that brought me here, wondering where I'd misplaced my worth. Friends, if this resonates, share it with someone who's felt the weight of sacrifice, who's wondered if their efforts were enough. Tell me where you're reading from. I never thought I'd share this chapter of my life, but what came next showed me that dreams deferred don't die, they transform. Let's go deeper, to the moment Horizon's betrayal cut deepest, and to the spark that refused to fade. I was 23 when I walked into Horizon Innovations, a tiny firm squeezed above a Fremont diner, the air thick with the scent of greasy burgers and ambition. Fresh from the University of Washington, my marketing degree still warm, I carried student loans that felt like anchors and dreams that burned brighter than the Seattle skyline. Horizon was a 12-person operation, a band of misfits coding and pitching in a world that didn't yet know our name. I started as a junior account coordinator, answering phones and organizing files, but I saw potential in every client call, every late-night brainstorm. By 26, I was closing deals solo, charming executives with persistence and a knack for listening. By 30, I'd landed accounts like Boeing and Microsoft, deals that turned Horizon from a local outfit into a regional player. By 40, my client portfolio was worth $250 million a year, the heartbeat of the company's growth. Those early years were electric. I'd sit in Fremont's dive bars, sketching strategies in my journal, the Puget Sound breeze drifting through open windows. I led lunch and learn sessions for new hires, sharing tricks I'd learned from sleepless nights and relentless hustle. I remember one night, after landing a major account, our founder, Sarah, toasted me with cheap wine, saying, "Laura, you're our secret weapon." That moment anchored me. Horizon wasn't just a job, it was my identity, my proof that I could build something lasting. I thrived on the chaos, the challenge, the thrill of turning skeptics into partners. But success demanded sacrifices, ones I didn't fully grasp until they piled up like unpaid bills. Somewhere in those frenetic years, I built a life. I met Mark, a charming graphic designer with a laugh that filled rooms. We married, had Ellie, then Noah, dreaming of a future filled with family vacations and cozy Seattle Sundays. But Mark craved freedom, not fatherhood, and when he left for his yoga instructor, claiming my workaholic life suffocated him, I was left to raise our kids alone. Ellie was 5, Noah 3, and I juggled daycare drop-offs with client meetings, bedtime stories with late-night emails. I missed Ellie's first recital, Noah's soccer games, moments I can never reclaim. At a rare family dinner in our Capitol Hill apartment, Ellie, then 10, looked at me with her big brown eyes and asked, "Mom, why do you work so hard?" I smiled, said it was for them, but inside, my heart cracked. Horizon became my refuge, the place where I could control outcomes, where my efforts mattered. The days after the boardroom rejection blurred into a haze, each one heavier than the last. I, Laura Bennett, 48, single mother of Ellie and Noah, and a 25-year veteran of Horizon Innovations, felt my world shrinking. The vice president of client success role, the one I'd poured my heart into earning, was handed to Sophie Nguyen, a 29-year-old newcomer with 6 months at the company. As Sophie's star rose, my faith in the system I'd trusted for decades crumbled. "Still I rise," I whispered, taping up a picture of Kerry Park, where I'd once vowed to build a legacy. I called Rachel, my life coach friend, who met me at a Fremont coffee shop. Over steaming lattes, she leaned in, her voice fierce. "Laura, they're trying to dim your light, don't let them. Reclaim your narrative." Her words were a lifeline, but the current pulling me under was strong. The workplace I'd known for 25 years was transforming, and I was no longer part of its vision. Horizon's new culture, shaped by James's obsession with disruption, prized youth over experience, flash over substance. Job postings sought digital natives and startup energy, terms that felt like coded rejections of my generation. Sophie, with her polished presentations and TikTok-savvy pitches, embodied the future James wanted. She wasn't the enemy, she was talented, driven, and kind, often thanking me for my guidance with a sincerity that made my resentment feel petty. But her rise illuminated my fall. At meetings I was still invited to, my suggestions were met with polite nods, then ignored. My emails to clients went unanswered, forwarded to Sophie's team. I felt like a ghost haunting my own career, visible but unheard, my 25 years of expertise reduced to a footnote. The emotional toll was relentless. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling of my apartment, replaying James's words. "Sophie aligns with where we're headed." I'd always prided myself on resilience, on adapting to every shift in tech's fast-moving world. I'd learned HTML in the 90s, mastered social media in the 2000s, embraced AI tools in the 2020s. But now, at 48, I was being told I couldn't keep up, that my age was a flaw no amount of effort could erase. I stopped joining colleagues for happy hours at Fremont's breweries, unable to bear their pitying glances or awkward silences. I avoided mirrors, afraid to see the lines around my eyes, the gray I dyed every 3 weeks, as if they confirmed Horizon's verdict. Yet, even in that darkness, I found ways to hold on. I joined a book club at a Capitol Hill bookstore, reading Untamed by Glennon Doyle with a group of women who shared stories of reinvention. Their courage, their laughter, reminded me I wasn't alone. I started a vision board ritual, each night adding a new quote or image to my bedroom wall, a mosaic of hope. One evening, I pinned a photo of myself at 23, standing outside Horizon's old Fremont office, eyes bright with possibility. That young woman hadn't let doubt stop her. I wouldn't either. I began attending Seattle's tech meetups again, forcing myself to walk into rooms filled with younger faces. At one event, I pitched an idea for a client portal, and a 20-something coder grinned, saying, "That's legit brilliant." His words were a small victory, a reminder that my mind was still sharp, my ideas still mattered. But the reality of my sidelining was inescapable. Sophie's first department meeting as VP was a masterclass in confidence. She outlined bold plans, referencing strategies I'd taught her, and the room applauded. I clapped too, my hands mechanical, my smile a mask. Afterward, she approached me, her eyes warm. "Laura, I couldn't have done this without you. You're a legend here." The word legend felt like a tombstone, as if I were already part of Horizon's past. I thanked her, my voice steady, and walked to my desk, where a new email awaited. Another client reassigned, another piece of my legacy handed to someone else. As I sat there, the hum of the open plan office buzzing around me, something shifted. The faith I'd placed in Horizon, in the idea that hard work would always be rewarded, was gone, scattered like leaves on a Seattle sidewalk. But in its place, a new feeling emerged, not defeat, but defiance. I opened my journal, the one I'd carried since my early days at Horizon, and wrote, "They can take my desk, my clients, my title, but they can't take my worth." Seattle's misty mornings, once a backdrop for my morning walks along Pike Place Market, now mirrored the fog in my mind. Horizon Innovations, the company I'd helped build into a tech titan, was pushing me to the margins, and the sting of ageism cut deeper than I ever imagined. Yet, in that slow erasure, I found a spark of defiance, a quiet resolve to rewrite the story they were trying to end. I didn't know how I'd fight back, but I knew I would. The woman who'd built an empire wasn't finished. She was just waking up. Friends, if this story stirs something in you, share it with someone who's felt invisible, who's wondered if their time has passed. Tell me where you're reading from. I never thought I'd lay my heart bare like this. But what happened next showed me that being pushed aside isn't the end, it's the beginning of something bigger. Let's dive deeper, to the moment I carried the weight of that invisibility, and the steps I took to find my light again. Sophie Nguyen arrived at Horizon like a burst of sunlight breaking through Seattle's clouds. Stanford MBA, former collegiate rower, she carried an effortless charisma that filled rooms. James Carter, our CEO, hired her as a senior strategist, and within weeks, she was a fixture in leadership meetings, her laughter echoing through the glass-walled offices. I saw her potential, her hunger to learn, and I welcomed it. I trained her myself, sharing the client contacts I'd nurtured for decades, the systems I'd perfected, the shortcuts I'd honed through countless late nights. I introduced her to executives at Boeing and Microsoft, walked her through pitches, and watched her soak it all in with a gratitude that felt genuine. I believed mentoring her showcased my leadership, proof I was ready for the VP role. I was a team player, after all, the woman who'd built Horizon's $250 million client portfolio with grit and grace. But as Sophie's name appeared on org charts and meeting invites, mine began to fade. The shift was subtle at first, like the slow fade of dusk over Puget Sound. After Sophie's promotion, announced in a company-wide email that landed like a punch, my role started shrinking. James moved me from my corner office, with its view of the Seattle skyline, to a shared desk in the open plan floor, sandwiched between two recent graduates who typed furiously to EDM, pulsing through their headphones. My direct reports, colleagues I'd mentored for years, were reassigned to younger managers under Sophie's supervision. Clients I'd worked with for decades, whose trust I'd earned through crises and celebrations, were transitioned to new account leads, with James citing long-term continuity as the reason. Continuity, as if I, at 48, was one step from retirement, my experience a liability rather than a strength. I overheard a colleague whisper, "Laura's too senior for the new vibe," and the words lodged in my chest like a stone. I tried to fight the tide. I signed up for Horizon's annual hackathon, hoping to prove I could still innovate alongside the 20-somethings. But a team lead, barely 30, gently suggested I was too senior to join, offering me a vague advisory role instead. I smiled, nodded, and walked away, my face burning. At home in my Capitol Hill apartment, I created a vision board, pinning quotes from Maya Angelou and photos of my kids, Ellie and Noah, to remind myself who I was. The world I'd built at Horizon Innovations was slipping through my fingers, and with it, the woman I thought I was. I'm Laura Bennett, 48, single mother of Ellie and Noah, and for 25 years, I'd been the linchpin of this Seattle tech firm. My $250 million client portfolio, its lifeblood. But after James Carter, our CEO, handed the Vice President of Client Success role to Sophie Nguyen, a 29-year-old I'd trained, I became a shadow in my own story. I started a gratitude jar. A mason jar on my nightstand where I'd slip notes of small victories. Made Ellie laugh today. Spoke up in a meeting. Didn't cry at work. Each note was a thread, weaving me back to myself. One Sunday, I wandered to Chihuly Garden and Glass, drawn to the vibrant sculptures that seemed to defy gravity. Standing beneath a cascade of red and gold glass, I felt my throat tighten. The sculptures were beautiful, fragile, yet enduring just, like the dreams I'd carried for 25 years. I sat on a bench, tears spilling over, and whispered, "I'm still here." A stranger, an older woman with kind eyes, handed me a tissue and said, "Whatever it is, you're stronger than you know." Her kindness cracked something open, a reminder that my worth wasn't tied to Horizon's rejection. I tried to reclaim my place at work, but the barriers were relentless. I proposed a client retention strategy in a rare meeting I was invited to, drawing on decades of insights. Sophie nodded politely, then pivoted to her own plan, and the room moved on. I volunteered for a company-wide diversity panel, hoping to share my perspective, but was told they needed younger voices to represent the future. Each rebuff chipped away at my confidence, but I kept showing up, my blazer pressed, my smile a shield. I'd walk to Cary Park after work, the Seattle skyline stretching before me, and journal in the fading light. "They can't erase what I've built," I wrote. "My relationships, my knowledge, that's mine." Rachel, my life coach friend, became my anchor. We met at a Fremont coffee shop, the aroma of espresso grounding me as I poured out my fears. "Laura, you're not invisible," she said, her voice fierce. "You're a force. Horizon's blind, but the world isn't." She suggested I start a personal branding workshop, a way to redefine my value outside the company's walls. I hesitated, unsure if I had anything left to offer, but her belief in me was a lifeline. I began sketching ideas in my journal, outlines for a workshop that would teach others to own their expertise, no matter their age. It was a small step, but it felt like planting a seed in barren soil. The hardest moments came at home, alone with my thoughts. I'd stand in my bathroom, staring at my reflection, the lines around my eyes, the gray I dyed every 3 weeks, the slight softness under my chin. "Is this why they don't see me?" I'd ask, my voice breaking. But then I'd think of Ellie's note on the fridge, Noah's proud grin when I visited his soccer game years ago, the clients who'd trusted me through decades of change. I wasn't invisible to them. I wasn't invisible to the women in my book club, to Rachel, to the stranger at Chihuly. I was still Laura Bennett, and I had fight left in me. One night, I added a note to my gratitude jar. "I showed up today." It wasn't much, but it was enough. I opened my journal and wrote, "This isn't the end. It's a detour." The words felt like a promise, a vow to the woman who'd built an empire, who'd raised 2 incredible kids, who'd never stopped learning. Horizon could take my desk, my clients, my title, but they couldn't take my resilience. My desk, my clients, my purpose all stripped away, replaced by a suffocating invisibility. Seattle's gray skies, once a comforting backdrop to my morning walks along Pike Place Market, now felt like a mirror to my fading presence. Yet in the depths of that darkness, I found small anchors, rituals, connections, a stubborn refusal to disappear that kept me tethered to hope. As I closed my journal, the Seattle rain tapping my window, I felt a shift, not victory. Not yet, but possibility. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew I'd face it on my terms. Friends, if this speaks to you, share it with someone who's felt unseen, who's wondered if they're enough. Tell me where you're reading from. I never thought I'd share this raw piece of my heart, but what came next showed me that invisibility isn't permanent. It's a challenge to shine brighter. Let's go deeper, to the moment a crisis changed everything, and I found the power I'd almost forgotten. Each day at Horizon brought a new kind of erasure. My corner office, with its view of the Space Needle, was gone, swapped for a shared desk in the open-plan floor, where I sat between two recent graduates blasting EDM through their headphones. My team, colleagues I'd mentored through late-night pitches and personal triumphs, reported to Sophie now. Clients I'd nurtured for decades, whose trust I'd earned over countless coffee meetings and crisis calls, were reassigned to younger managers. James justified it with vague promises of continuity, as if I, at 48, were already halfway out the door. I'd walk through the office, past glass-walled meeting rooms where Sophie's voice carried, confident and bright, and feel colleagues' eyes slide past me, their silence louder than any rejection. I was still there. Still Laura Bennett, but I was invisible, a relic in a company I'd built. The weight of that invisibility pressed harder with every passing week. I'd wake up in my Capitol Hill apartment, heart racing, the clock glowing 3 a.m., panic attacks crept in, uninvited, stealing my breath as I stood under the shower's hot spray, trying to wash away the fear. I lost 10 pounds I couldn't afford, my clothes hanging loose, a physical echo of my shrinking presence. Sleep became a stranger, replaced by nights spent scrolling job boards on my laptop, the screen's blue light casting shadows across my vision board. Quotes from Maya Angelou, photos of Ellie and Noah, a reminder of who I was fighting for. But the listings I found were a maze of buzzwords. Digital native, startup energy, dynamic innovator. Each one felt like a door slamming shut. A coded message that at 48, I was too old for the future. I hid my unraveling from my kids. Noah, 19, called from his dorm at UCLA, his voice bright with sophomore year excitement. "Mom, you sound off. Everything okay?" I forced a laugh, lied about a big project, unable to admit that my days at Horizon were empty, my inbox a ghost town. Ellie, home from college for spring break, left notes on the fridge. "Proud of you, Mom." I couldn't bear to tell her the truth that her mother, who'd missed her recitals for work, was being discarded by the company she'd given everything to. I'd sit at my kitchen table, calculating how long my savings could last without my salary, how I'd cover Ellie and Noah's tuition, how I'd explain a resume gap to recruiters who'd see my age before my achievements. The numbers blurred, and so did my sense of self. But even in that spiral, I sought solace. I joined a book club at a Capitol Hill bookstore, a small act of defiance against my isolation. We read Untamed by Glennon Doyle, and as the women around me shared stories of rebuilding after betrayal, I felt less alone. One night, a retired teacher named Claire said, "You don't lose your fire, Laura. You just have to find where it's hiding." Her words stayed with me, a beacon in the fog. The weight of invisibility had settled into my bones, a quiet ache that followed me through Seattle's misty streets. I'm Laura Bennett, 48, single mother of Ellie and Noah, and for 25 years I'd been the backbone of Horizon Innovations, my $250 million client portfolio, its foundation. But after James Carter, our CEO, handed the Vice President of Client Success role to Sophie Nguyen, a 29-year-old I'd mentored, I'd been sidelined, my desk relocated, my clients reassigned, my voice ignored. Whatever it takes, after months of being invisible, they needed me know my title. Not my desk, but the relationships I'd built, the trust I'd earned. For the first time in months, I felt the ground beneath me solidify. I excused myself, saying I needed to review Boeing's file, and walked to the bathroom, locking myself in a stall. I pressed my forehead against the cool metal door, my heart pounding not with anxiety, but with possibility. This wasn't just a crisis. It was leverage, a chance to reclaim the power they'd stripped away. I pulled out my phone and recorded a voice memo, my thoughts spilling out like a chess strategy. "Margaret trusts me. Boeing's my legacy. I can save this. But not for them, for me." I thought of my gratitude jar at home, filled with notes of small wins, and my journal where I'd written, "They can't take my worth." This was my moment to prove it. I'd met Margaret a month ago at a Fremont coffee shop, a casual catch-up between old friends. Over lattes, she'd asked pointed questions about my career, noting I seemed less vibrant than usual. I'd been vague, protective of my professional image, but her call now told me she'd connected the dots. Boeing's dissatisfaction wasn't just about Sophie's strategies, it was about me, the partner they trusted, being pushed aside. As I left the bathroom, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel, my life coach friend. "You've got this, Laura. Own your power." Her words were a spark, igniting a plan. Back at my desk, I opened Boeing's file, but my mind was elsewhere. I texted Margaret on her private line, a number I'd kept from years of collaboration. "Need to talk before the 3 p.m. call. Important." She replied instantly. "Expected to hear from you. Call now." I grabbed my purse, slipped into the stairwell, and dialed. The heavy metal door muffling the office's hum. "Laura, what's going on?" Margaret's voice was warm but firm. I took a breath and told her the truth, not everything, but enough. My sidelining, the shift to younger managers, the company's pivot away from experience. "Your new proposals are off base," she said, her tone sharp. "Our numbers are down 10% since you left our account. My board's ready to walk." I paced the concrete stairwell, my heels echoing. "What do you need, Margaret?" I asked, my voice steady. "You, Laura, back on our account, fully empowered, or we're done with Horizon." She paused, her next words careful. "Unless you're already planning your next move." The question hung between us. A door swinging open. Was I? I hadn't let myself consider it. Not fully, but her words stirred something I'd buried under loyalty and fear. "I need to think about what's best for me," I said, choosing each word with care. "Think fast," she replied. "If you're not running point by week's end, we're out." I hung up, my mind racing. I checked my personal email, noticing 3 unread messages from rival firms Cascade Partners, Zenith Solutions, Peak Dynamics, all sent in the past month, with subject lines like "opportunity to discuss" and "your expertise interests us." I'd been so consumed with surviving Horizon that I hadn't seen the recruiters circling, drawn to the relationships I'd built. I'd fought to hold on, filling a gratitude jar with small victories, sketching plans for a personal branding workshop, but the world I'd built was slipping away. Then, one gray Wednesday morning, a crisis broke the silence, and suddenly, the company that had deemed me obsolete needed the one thing they couldn't replace: my 25 years of client relationships. In that moment, I found a power I'd almost forgotten, a spark that lit the path to my reckoning. Standing in that stairwell, the Puget Sound breeze slipping through a cracked window, I felt a smile form, the first genuine one in months. I had options. I had power. I had a choice. I walked back to the office, my posture straighter, my steps deliberate. James waved me into his office, his forehead glistening with sweat. "Have you spoken to Margaret?" he asked, his voice tight. "Not yet," I lied smoothly, taking a seat in the power chair, the one reserved for visitors. "But I've reviewed the account. We need to discuss my role before I proceed." Sophie, standing by the window, turned sharply. "Your role?" I crossed my legs, adjusting my blazer, and met her gaze. "Yes. If I'm saving Boeing, I need clarity on what's in it for me." For the first time in months, I wasn't asking for permission. I was setting terms. Friends, if this moment resonates, share it with someone who's felt overlooked but found their strength. Tell me where you're reading from. I never thought I'd share this turning point, but what happened next showed me that power isn't given it's claimed. Let's dive deeper, to the negotiations that changed everything, and the courage I found to rewrite my future. It started like any other day at Horizon. I sat at my shared desk, the hum of EDM from my neighbor's headphones, a grating reminder of my diminished place. I was updating my LinkedIn profile, tweaking words to mask the erosion of my role, when James appeared beside me, his face pale, his usual polish frayed. "Laura, conference room, now." His urgency was a jolt, pulling me from my haze. I followed him, my blazer pressed, my expression calm, though my heart raced with questions. Inside the sleek boardroom, with its view of the Space Needle, I found Sophie pacing, her confidence shattered, and 2 board members glaring from a video screen. The air was thick with panic, and I felt a dangerous flutter in my chest, not fear, but anticipation. "What's going on?" I asked, taking a seat, my voice steady despite the tension. James ran a hand through his thinning hair, avoiding my eyes. "Boeing's threatening to cancel their contract. All of it. Effective immediately." The words hit like a thunderclap. Boeing, our biggest client, a $60 million annual account, accounted for 25% of Horizon's revenue. I'd managed their account for 2 decades, through 3 CEOs, building trust over countless meetings and crises. Sophie had taken over 3 months ago, her modernized strategies replacing my proven methods. Now, the consequences were clear. On what grounds? I asked, keeping my tone neutral, though my mind was already piecing it together. They say we've been unresponsive, James muttered, that our new strategies don't fit their culture. Margaret Lee, their CEO, is demanding to speak with you. Says if you're not on the call this afternoon, they're walking. Margaret Lee. I'd known her for 15 years, from her days as a rising executive at Boeing. We'd shared dinners at Fremont restaurants, bonded over the challenges of leading in a male-dominated industry. Recently, I'd volunteered at a Seattle STEM program, where we'd reconnected informally, chatting about careers and change. I hadn't mentioned my sidelining, but Margaret's sharp instincts must have sensed it when Sophie's emails replaced mine. I leaned back, letting James's words settle, feeling their weight shift the room's gravity. Me. The woman they'd moved to a shared desk, whose clients they'd reassigned, whose expertise they'd dismissed as outdated. I'm not on the account anymore, I said, my voice calm, almost curious. Sophie snapped, her composure gone. This isn't funny, Laura. We could lose everything. Her desperation was palpable, but it was James's plea that struck me. You need to fix this. Whatever it takes. The air in Horizon Innovations' boardroom crackled with desperation, a stark contrast to the Seattle rain tapping the floor-to-ceiling windows. I'm Laura Bennett, 48, single mother of Ellie and Noah, and for 25 years, I'd been the unseen force behind this tech firm's $250 million client portfolio. But after being sidelined, my role reduced to a shared desk while Sophie Nguyen, a 29-year-old I'd trained, took the Vice President of Client Success title. I'd found my leverage. I leaned back, letting the weight of my words settle. You told me I was too old for leadership, James. Now you need my experience to save the company. So, what's it going to be? James's face drained of color, his hands gripping the table. Laura, we value your contribution, he began, his voice unsteady. I held up a hand, stopping him. No platitudes. 6 months ago, you said Sophie was the future. Now, you're begging for my past. If I'm going to fix this, I need more than promises. I need security, freedom, and respect. Sophie's eyes widened, her usual confidence gone. Laura, this isn't personal, she said, echoing James's earlier excuse. I tilted my head, my smile faint but sharp. It's always been personal, Sophie. You just didn't see it. The board members on the screen exchanged glances, their murmurs inaudible but tense. Garrett, the CFO, spoke up, his tone cautious. We'd need board approval for some of this. It's a significant commitment. I nodded, unfazed. Then get it. The call with Boeing is at 3 p.m. You have 2 hours. I stood, gathering my papers, my movements deliberate. James sputtered, You can't just leave. I paused, meeting his gaze. Watch me. I walked out, feeling their stunned silence on my back, my heels clicking against the polished floor. For the first time in months, I stood tall, not as the woman they'd erased, but as the one they couldn't ignore. I drove to Cary Park, the Seattle skyline stretching before me, and sat on a bench, my journal open. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled of cedar and possibility. I wrote, This is what power feels like. Not their approval, but my choice. I thought of my mother, who'd once told me, Never let anyone dim your light, Laura. Her words, etched in memory, guided me now. I'd spent 25 years building Horizon's empire, sacrificing family dinners, Ellie's recitals, Noah's games. They'd taken that loyalty and discarded it. But they couldn't take the relationships I'd forged, the expertise I'd honed, the woman I'd become. At home in my Capitol Hill apartment, I made a proper lunch no sad desk salad today. As I ate, I opened my laptop and reviewed the emails from rival firms. Cascade Partners offered a senior director role in Portland. Zenith Solutions hinted at a VP position with room for my client portfolio. Peak Dynamics wanted to discuss strategic leadership. Each message was a reminder that my value extended beyond Horizon's walls. I called Rachel, her voice a lifeline. "Laura, you're unstoppable," she said, laughing. "You've got them cornered." I smiled, feeling the truth of her words. I wasn't cornered. They were. I also called Karen, my lawyer, confirming the severance terms were airtight. "If they sign, you're free," she said. "If they don't, you've got options." Free. The word felt foreign, but it was sinking in. I added a note to my gratitude jar. I chose myself today. It joined others. Made Ellie laugh. Spoke up in a meeting. Small victories that had rebuilt my strength. I glanced at my vision board, Maya Angelou's words staring back. Still I rise. The Boeing crisis hour biggest client, threatening to walk, had thrust me back into the spotlight, their CEO, Margaret Lee, demanding my involvement. In that moment, I wasn't just Laura, the overlooked veteran. I was Laura, the woman holding the keys to Horizon's survival. As I sat across from James Carter, our CEO, and Sophie, I wasn't asking for fairness, I was demanding it. My terms clear, my resolve unbreakable. This was my power play, and I was ready to rewrite my future. I was rising, not for Horizon, but for me, for the life I deserved. I returned to Horizon at 2:30 p.m., my resolve like armor. James and Sophie waited in the boardroom, a contract on the table, their faces a mix of relief and dread. "The board's reviewing your terms," James said, his voice strained. I nodded, taking the power chair again. "Good. I'll prepare for the Boeing call. But I need your decision before we dial." The clock ticked, each second a reminder of the power I'd reclaimed. I wasn't just saving their company. I was securing my future, on my terms. Friends, if this moment of standing tall speaks to you, share it with someone who's fought to be seen. Tell me where you're reading from. I never thought I'd share this chapter of courage. But what happened next showed me that power isn't just claimed, it's wielded. Let's go deeper, to the call that sealed my legacy, and the steps I took to walk away unbroken. The Boeing crisis had shifted everything. Margaret's ultimatum, either I lead their $60 million account, or they'd leave, had exposed Horizon's miscalculation. They'd dismissed my 25 years of client relationships as outdated. But now, those relationships were their only lifeline. In the stairwell earlier, I'd confirmed my leverage with Margaret, her words ringing clear. "You, Laura, fully empowered, or we're done." I'd also discovered emails from rival firms, Cascade Partners, Zenith Solutions, Peak Dynamics, offering roles that valued my expertise. Standing in that concrete stairwell, the Puget Sound breeze slipping through a cracked window, I'd recorded a voice memo, my strategy taking shape. This is my moment. Not to beg, but to demand. For me, for Ellie, for Noah. Now, back in the boardroom, I felt the weight of that power, a quiet strength I hadn't known I still possessed. James's forehead glistened with sweat, his usual polish unraveling. "Have you spoken to Margaret?" he asked, his voice tight. I took the power chair, the one reserved for visitors, and crossed my legs, adjusting my blazer. "Not yet," I said smoothly. My lie deliberate. "But I've reviewed the Boeing account. Before I proceed, we need to discuss my role." Sophie, standing by the window, turned sharply, her composure frayed. "Your role?" Her tone held a mix of disbelief and fear. But I met her gaze, unflinching. "Yes. If I'm saving Boeing, I need guarantees about my place here or elsewhere." The room stilled, the board members on the video screen leaning closer, their silence heavy with calculation. I'd prepared for this moment, not just in the stairwell, but in the weeks of quiet rebellion. My gratitude jar at home, filled with notes of small wins, had taught me to value my resilience. My journal, where I'd written, "They can't take my worth," was my compass. And my call with Rachel, my life coach friend, had solidified my plan. Over coffee in Fremont, she'd urged me to own my power, suggesting I consult a Seattle employment lawyer to ensure my demands were ironclad. I'd met with Karen Voss, a sharp attorney in Belltown, who reviewed Horizon's policies and confirmed I could negotiate a severance that waived my non-compete clause. "You're not trapped, Laura," Karen had said, her eyes steady. "You're free to choose." That freedom fueled me now. A fire kindled by years of loyalty and betrayal. I slid a document across the table. my demands typed in crisp black ink. "This is what I need to move forward," I said, my voice calm but unyielding. The terms were clear: a severance package with 3 years' salary, full benefits continuation, and a complete waiver of my non-compete and non-solicitation clauses. If they wanted me to save Boeing, they'd pay the price for sidelining me. And if they refused, I'd walk, taking my relationships and the truth to Margaret Lee. The clock in Horizon Innovations boardroom ticked toward 3 p.m., each second a pulse of possibility. I'm Laura Bennett, 48, single mother of Ellie and Noah, and for 25 years, I'd been the unseen architect of this Seattle tech firm's $250 million client portfolio. After being sidelined, my role reduced to a shared desk, while Sophie Nguyen, a 29-year-old I'd mentored, claimed the Vice President of Client Success title. I'd reclaimed my power. For the next 90 minutes, I walked Margaret through a transition plan, my expertise anchoring every word. I proposed a 3-month period where I'd personally oversee the account, ensuring continuity while training Sophie to align with Boeing's needs. I praised Sophie's strategic thinking, framing her as a capable leader who'd benefit from deeper client insight. I outlined quarterly reviews to maintain trust, emphasizing Boeing's unique culture, which I'd understood for 2 decades. My tone was professional, collaborative, never betraying the severance agreement or my plans to leave. Margaret listened, asked sharp questions, and agreed to stay with Horizon, provided I remained a consultant post-transition. "Laura, you're the reason we've stayed this long," she said, her words a quiet vindication. "Don't disappear on us." When the call ended, the room exhaled. James leaned forward, his relief palpable. "You saved the account," he said, almost disbelieving. "After everything, you still saved it." I met his gaze, my voice calm but pointed. I honored my commitments. Something this company could learn from. Sophie nodded, her eyes wide with something like awe. "Laura, that was incredible," she said. But I didn't linger on her praise. I gathered my papers, stood, and spoke my truth. "My resignation is effective immediately. I'll clear my desk by end of day. HR can mail my final check." The silence that followed was profound, a mix of shock and resignation. James opened his mouth, then closed it, his argument spent. Sophie's voice was small. "Where are you going?" I paused at the door, turning to face them. "To a company that sees experience as an asset, not a liability." I walked out, my heels clicking against the polished floor, past the open plan office where colleagues glanced up, their whispers trailing me. I didn't look back. For the first time in months, I felt light, unburdened, the weight of invisibility lifted by the power I'd claimed. I drove to Fremont, parking near a favorite coffee shop, and called Rachel. "It's done," I said, my voice trembling with joy, not sorrow. "I'm free." She laughed, her excitement infectious. "Laura, you're a force. Come over, we're celebrating." I smiled, promising to meet her later, and walked to the Fremont Troll. The quirky sculpture, a reminder of Seattle's eclectic spirit. I sat beneath it, opened my journal, and wrote, "I didn't just save Boeing, I saved myself." The words felt like a vow, a bridge to the future I'd almost stopped believing in. That evening, I hosted a farewell lunch for my veteran colleagues at a Pike Place Market Bistro, a last act of connection. Over seafood and wine, I shared lessons I'd learned. Value yourself, build your network, never let loyalty blind you. Their outrage at my sidelining, their promises to stay in touch, warmed me, but I knew this chapter was closing. As I drove home to Capitol Hill, my phone buzzed with an email from Cascade Partners, a Portland firm offering a senior role. I didn't reply not yet. I needed time to breathe, to let the magnitude of my choice settle. The Boeing crisis hour biggest client threatening to walk had forced Horizon to need me, their CEO, James Carter, signing a severance agreement that freed me from their constraints. Now, as I prepared for a critical call with Boeing's CEO, Margaret Lee, I wasn't just saving their account. I was honoring my legacy, closing a chapter on my terms, and stepping into a future I dared to imagine. At my apartment, I added a note to my gratitude jar. I walked away on my terms. It joined others, made Ellie laugh. Chose myself today. Testaments to my resilience. I stood before my vision board, Maya Angelou's words staring back. Still I rise. I'd risen, not by clinging to horizon, but by releasing it. I thought of Ellie and Noah, of the lessons I'd teach them about courage, about refusing to let others define your worth. I thought of Margaret Lee, whose trust had given me leverage, and Rachel, whose belief had steadied me. Loyalty, I realized, wasn't about a company. It was about the people who saw you, who lifted you, who reminded you who you were. As I stood at my window, the Seattle skyline twinkling against the night, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Horizon had been my home, but homes could betray. I'd built their empire, but now I was building my own. The Cascade email waited, a door to a new beginning, but for tonight, I was content to stand in this moment, free, whole, unstoppable. I wasn't the woman they'd sidelined. I was Laura Bennett, 48, and my story was just beginning. Friends, if this story of breaking free resonates, share it with someone who's ready to claim their power. Tell me where you're reading from. I never thought I'd share this leap of faith, but what happened next showed me that walking away isn't defeat, it's victory. Let's go deeper, to the new chapter that awaited, and the legacy I built beyond Horizon's walls. The Seattle skyline, visible through the boardroom's windows, shimmered with promise, and I was ready to walk away unbroken. The severance agreement, signed by James, the CFO, and the board, lay on the table. 3 years' salary, full benefits, and a waived non-compete clause. It was more than a contract. It was my emancipation, secured through a power play that had stunned them. I demanded it, leveraging Boeing's ultimatum and my 25 years of client relationships, and they'd complied, their signatures a grudging acknowledgement of my worth. But this moment wasn't about their defeat. It was about my victory, my refusal to let Horizon define me. As I sat in the power chair, my blazer crisp, my journal tucked in my bag, I felt a quiet strength, rooted in the gratitude jar at my Capitol Hill apartment, filled with notes of resilience, and the vision board that reminded me to rise. The call with Boeing was set for 3 p.m., and I'd spent the morning preparing, not just for Horizon, but for myself. I'd driven to Cary Park after leaving the office, the city's skyline a canvas for my thoughts. There, I'd written in my journal, "This call isn't their salvation, it's my closure." I'd called Rachel, my life coach friend, who'd cheered from her Fremont office. "Laura, you're rewriting the rules," she'd said, her voice bright. "Show them who you are." I'd also texted Karen Voss, my Seattle employment lawyer, confirming the agreement's terms were airtight. "You're free," Karen had replied, and that word free echoed as I returned to Horizon, my resolve like armor. At 3 p.m., I dialed Margaret Lee on speaker, the boardroom silent except for the hum of the video screen. James and Sophie sat across from me, their faces tense, the board members watching remotely. "Margaret, it's Laura Bennett," I said, my voice clear, steady. "I have the Horizon executive team here." Margaret's voice boomed through, warm but firm. "Laura, good to hear you. I was starting to think they'd locked you away." Her humor broke the tension, and I smiled, glancing at James's discomfort. "Not at all," I replied. "We've been discussing the future of the Boeing account, and I'm here to ensure it thrives." The Seattle rain had given way to Portland's golden light, and as I stood in my new corner office at Cascade Partners, overlooking the Pearl District's vibrant streets, I felt a joy I hadn't known in years. I'm Laura Bennett, 48, single mother of Ellie and Noah, and after 25 years at Horizon Innovations, where I'd built a $250 million client portfolio only to be sidelined for Sophie Nguyen, a 29-year-old I'd trained, I'd walked away. I shared my story beyond Cascade, accepting an invitation to speak at a Women in Tech conference in Portland's convention center. Standing before 500 attendees, I recounted my journey Horizon's betrayal, the Boeing crisis, my leap to Cascade. At 48, I was told I was too old, I said, my voice steady. But experience isn't a liability, it's your competitive edge. The room erupted in applause, a standing ovation that brought tears to my eyes. Afterward, women approached me, sharing their own stories of ageism, their gratitude a lifeline. One, a 45-year-old developer, said, "You gave me hope." I handed her my card, promising to mentor her, knowing my story could light paths for others. Back at Cascade, I thrived in ways Horizon never allowed. I led a pitch that secured a $20 million account, my team cheering as we celebrated at a Pearl District brewery. I mentored young leaders, teaching them to build trust as I had, while learning from their fresh perspectives. My Silver Expertise initiative grew, earning Cascade praise in industry blogs. I added a note to my gratitude jar, now moved from Capitol Hill to my Portland loft. I'm building something real. My vision board, pinned with Maya Angelou's words. Still I Rise came with me, a reminder of the resilience that had carried me here. Horizon's shadow lingered, but only faintly. I'd heard whispers of their struggles, lost accounts. A stock dip, James's resignation. But they felt distant, like news from a city I'd left behind. My focus was forward, on the life I was creating. Margaret Lee's text about lunch hinted at Boeing's interest, and I knew that when the non-poaching period ended, they'd likely follow, not because I'd solicited them, but because trust was my currency. Cascade's ethics policy prevented poaching, but nothing stopped clients from choosing a leader they valued. I smiled, sipping coffee in my office, the Willamette River glinting outside. My family saw the change in me. Ellie, interning at a Seattle nonprofit, called one night, her voice bright. "Mom, my boss says I'm a natural leader. I think it's because of you." I blinked back tears, remembering the nights I'd missed her recitals for Horizon. "You're your own light, Ellie," I said, my heart swelling. Noah, at UCLA, sent a photo of himself at a soccer game, captioned, "Wish you were here, but I'm proud of you." Their belief in me mirrored my own, a cycle of love and strength. I planned a family weekend in Portland, imagining us exploring Forest Park, rebuilding the moments I'd lost to work. Rachel visited from Seattle, and over wine at a Pearl District bistro, we toasted my journey. "You didn't just survive, Laura," she said, her eyes shining. "You redefined what's possible." I laughed, raising my glass. To new chapters. She'd been my anchor, her advice to own my power. A spark that had ignited this path. I thought of my mother's words, "Never let anyone dim your light," and felt her presence guiding me still. My journal filled with new entries. Spoke to 500 people, hiked with my kids, built a team that thrives. Each one was a brick in the legacy I was crafting, one that honored my past but wasn't bound by it. The Boeing crisis had forced Horizon to need my relationships, and I'd used that leverage to secure a severance that freed me. Now, 3 months later, I was Executive Vice President of Strategic Accounts at Cascade Partners. My salary 50% higher, my team diverse and dynamic, my purpose renewed. This wasn't just a job. It was a reinvention, a testament to the truth that experience, at 48, was my greatest asset, not a liability. One evening, I walked to Portland's waterfront park, the river reflecting the city's lights. I opened my journal and wrote, "I'm not too old. I'm just beginning." The words felt like a vow, a promise to the 23-year-old who'd joined Horizon with big dreams, to the 48-year-old who'd walked away with bigger ones. Cascade wasn't just a job. It was a platform to show the world that experience, at any age, was power. I thought of the women at the conference, the coder at my workshop, my kids watching me soar. My legacy wasn't just accounts or title sit, was the lives I touched, the barriers I broke. As I stood by the river, my phone buzzed with a message from Margaret Lee. "Contract review next month. Free for coffee?" I smiled, typing back, "Always time for you." The future was open, and I was ready not as Horizon's discarded veteran, but as Cascade's unstoppable leader. I was Laura Bennett, 48, and my prime was now. Friends, if this story of starting anew inspires you, share it with someone chasing their own second act. Tell me where you're reading from. I never thought I'd share this chapter of joy, but what happened next showed me that reinvention isn't just personal, it's a ripple that changes everything. Let's go deeper, to the impact of my choices and the lives they touched beyond my own. As I looked out at Portland's skyline, I knew I wasn't just starting over, I was thriving. Leaving Horizon had been a leap, but the landing felt like coming home. Cascade Partners, a rising tech consultancy in Portland's bustling Pearl District, had courted me during my final weeks at Horizon. their email offering a senior role that valued my client portfolio and expertise. After negotiations, guided by Karen Voss, my Seattle employment lawyer, I'd signed on as EVP, tasked with leading a new division for strategic accounts. My first day, walking into Cascade's modern office with its exposed brick and collaborative vibe, I felt a spark I'd lost at Horizon. My team engineers, strategists, creatives, ranging from 25 to 60, greeted me with respect, not pity. My assistant, Mia, handed me a coffee and said, "We've heard about your Boeing work. You're kind of a legend." I laughed, the word no longer a tombstone but a badge of honor. My role at Cascade was a dream realized. I led high-stakes accounts, including early talks with Boeing, who'd hinted at following me once Cascade's 12-month non-poaching clause expired. Margaret Lee, Boeing's CEO, texted me after a meeting. "Your new proposals are spot on. Lunch soon?" I smiled, knowing our trust, built over decades, was mine, not Horizon's. I fostered a culture that celebrated all voices, launching a Silver Expertise initiative that paired veteran employees with younger ones for mutual learning. At our first workshop, a 30-year-old coder thanked me for valuing his mentor, a 55-year-old engineer. "This place feels different," he said, and I nodded, my heart full. Different was exactly what I'd wanted. Portland became my canvas for reinvention. I rented a loft in the Pearl District, its high ceilings and open spaces a metaphor for my new beginning. Weekends, I explored the city, wandering Powell's books, or sipping coffee in Lansu Chinese Garden, my journal always with me. I wrote, "This is what freedom feels like, not just a new job, but a new me." One Sunday, I hiked Columbia River Gorge with Ellie and Noah, home from college, their laughter echoing as we trekked past waterfalls. "Mom, you seem happy," Noah said, his eyes searching mine. I hugged him, tears pricking. "I am, honey." "Really?" Ellie, ever perceptive, added, "You're like glowing." Their pride anchored me, a reminder that my reinvention was for them too. The Portland skyline glowed against the twilight, a canvas of possibility that mirrored the life I'd built. I'm Laura Bennett, 48, single mother of Ellie and Noah, and after 25 years at Horizon Innovations, where I'd crafted a $250 million client portfolio only to be sidelined for Sophie Nguyen, a 20-year-old I'd trained, I'd rewritten my story. My story spread beyond my family, touching a community hungry for change. After speaking at Portland's Women in Tech conference, where my story of overcoming ageism earned a standing ovation, I received emails from strangers, women, men, young and old, who'd heard my talk or read about it online. A 50-year-old engineer wrote, "Your story gave me the guts to negotiate a promotion." A 30-year-old designer said, "I'm mentoring my older colleague because of you." Each message was a ripple, proof that my journey wasn't just mine. I started a podcast, Silver Expertise, from my Portland loft, interviewing professionals over 40 about their career pivots. The first episode, featuring a 55-year-old coder who'd launched a startup, hit 10,000 downloads, listeners emailing from Seattle to Miami. "You're changing the conversation, Rachel," my Seattle life coach friend said over coffee at Lansu Chinese Garden. I smiled, knowing she'd helped spark this fire. I gave back to my new city, volunteering as a career coach at Portland Community College, where I worked with midlife job seekers. One client, Maria, a 52-year-old accountant, had been laid off after 20 years. "I thought I was done," she told me, her voice trembling. I shared my story, helped her craft a resume, highlighting her expertise, and watched her land a role at a local firm. "You reminded me I'm enough," she said, hugging me. Her victory felt like mine, a ripple that extended my impact. I added a note to my gratitude jar. Helped Maria shine. It joined others, spoke to thousands, hugged my kids. Small acts, weaving a tapestry of purpose. Cascade Partners amplified my influence. My Silver Expertise initiative, pairing veteran and younger employees, became a model for other firms, featured in a Forbes article. My team thrived, securing accounts with my strategic vision, and Boeing's Margaret Lee hinted at a contract review, their trust in me unwavering. One evening, walking along Waterfront Park, the river reflecting Portland's lights, I opened my journal and wrote, My ripples are my legacy. I thought of my mother's words. Never let anyone dim your light, and felt her pride. My vision board, pinned with Maya Angelou's Still I Rise, had guided me here, to a life where my experience was a beacon, not a burden. Ellie visited one weekend, and we explored Forest Park, the trail's quiet beauty a backdrop for our talks. "Mom, you're different," she said, pausing by a stream. "Not just happy stronger." I hugged her, tears falling. "I learned to choose myself," I said. Her internship success, her confidence, was my greatest ripple, proof that my reinvention had reshaped her path. Noah called later, sharing his own dreams, and I knew my courage had given them wings. Rachel, joining us for dinner in the Pearl District, toasted to Laura, the ripple that became a wave. We laughed, but her words rang true. I wasn't just surviving, I was inspiring. The ripples reached Horizons veterans too. A former colleague, Diane, texted from Seattle, saying my exit had prompted her to negotiate a raise. "You showed us we're worth more," she wrote. Their courage was a gift, a sign that my stand had cracked open doors. I thought of my book club in Capitol Hill, the women who'd cheered my resilience, and the stranger at Chihuly Garden and Glass who'd offered a tissue when I'd cried. They'd all been ripples, lifting me when I'd fallen, and now I was returning the favor. The Boeing crisis had forced Horizon to need my relationships, and I'd leveraged that to secure a severance, walking away to join Cascade Partners as Executive Vice President of Strategic Accounts. Now, 6 months into my new chapter in Portland's Pearl District, I saw the ripples of my choices spreading through Horizon's unraveling, my family's pride, and a community inspired to challenge ageism. One night, I received a letter from a conference attendee, a 47-year-old manager who'd quit a toxic job after hearing my story. "You showed me I'm not too old to start over," she wrote. I read it at Waterfront Park, the city's lights blurring through tears. Her words were a mirror, reflecting the impact I'd never anticipated. I added a podcast episode about her, titled Not Too Old, and listeners flooded my inbox with their own stories. My journey had become a movement, a call to value experience at every age. As I stood by the river, my journal open, I wrote, "My legacy isn't just what I built, it's who I lifted. I was Laura Bennett, 48, and my ripples were changing lives, from my kids to strangers, from Seattle to Portland. The tech world was listening, and I was leading, not as Horizon's legend, but as Cascade's light." Friends, if these ripples touch you, share this with someone ready to make waves. Tell me where you're reading from. I never thought I'd share this web of impact, but what happened next showed me that true revenge is living fully, inspiring widely. Let's go deeper, to the meaning of it all, and the victory that redefined my life. Each ripple was a testament to the power of standing tall, a legacy that reached beyond my own life, lighting paths for others. Horizon's fallout was the first wave. News trickled in through industry blogs and old colleagues' texts. The company had lost 2 major accounts after Boeing, their stock plunging 15%. James Carter, the CEO who dismissed me as too old, resigned amid pressure from a shaken board. I read the updates at my Cascade office, the Willamette River glinting outside, and felt no vicious satisfaction, only a quiet certainty that actions have consequences. Horizon's culture, obsessed with youth over experience, had sown its own unraveling. I'd saved their Boeing account with a 90-minute call, but I couldn't save them from themselves. Their loss was a distant echo, overshadowed by the life I was building, but it underscored a truth. Companies that discard loyalty pay a price, even if it comes on its own schedule. Sophie Nguyen reached out via LinkedIn, her message unexpected. "Laura, I learned more from watching you leave than from all our time working together," she wrote. "If you ever have an opening, I'd love to talk." I sat with her words, remembering her confidence, her gratitude when I'd trained her. She wasn't the villain in my story, just a player in a system that pitted us against each other. I accepted her connection, but not her request. She had lessons to learn about humility, about valuing those who'd paved her pathand. I wasn't her teacher anymore. Her acknowledgement, though, was a ripple, a sign that my exit had left a mark, challenging her to grow. My family felt the deepest impact. Ellie, 21, interning at a Seattle nonprofit, called one evening, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Mom, my supervisor says I have a shot at a full-time role after graduation," she said. "It's because of you. Watching you stand up, start over it, showed me I can do anything." I blinked back tears, sitting in my Pearl District loft, my gratitude jar glowing under a lamp. I'd missed her recitals for Horizon, but now I was giving her something greater, a model of courage. "You're your own star, Ellie," I said, my heart swelling. Noah, 19, at UCLA, texted a photo from a soccer game, captioned, "Inspired by you, Mom." Their pride was a mirror, reflecting the woman I'd become, not Horizon's discarded veteran, but a mother who'd taught her children to rise. The Portland sunrise painted the sky in hues of gold and rose, a quiet promise of new beginnings. I'm Laura Bennett, 48, single mother of Ellie and Noah, and after 25 years at Horizon Innovations, where I built a $250 million client portfolio, only to be sidelined for Sophie Nguyen, a 29-year-old I'd transformed my story. Karen Voss, my lawyer, had ensured my freedom, her expertise a shield. Margaret Lee had reminded me that trust, not titles, was my currency. Even Sophie, in her LinkedIn message, had acknowledged my impact, a ripple of my departure. These connections, not Horizon's logo, were my legacy. One morning, I drove to Alki Beach, a place I'd visited during Seattle visits, its waves a reminder of resilience. I unrolled my yoga mat, the Puget Sound breeze cool against my skin, and moved through poses, each breath a release of the past. As I held warrior pose, I thought of my mother's words. "Never let anyone dim your light, Laura." She'd been my first teacher, her strength guiding me through divorce, single parenthood, and Horizon's betrayal. Now, at Cascade, I was honoring her, shining brighter than ever. I opened my journal, its pages filled with victories. Boeing saved, a podcast launched, a team inspired, and wrote, "Revenge is thriving where they doubted me. Success is living my truth." I was planning a memoir, too old at 48 asterisk, to share my journey with a wider audience. The idea had come during a hike in Columbia River Gorge with Ellie and Noah, their encouragement a balm. "Mom, your story's bigger than you," Ellie had said, her eyes bright. I'd started outlining chapters in my Portland loft, each one a reflection on ageism, resilience, and reinvention. The memoir wasn't about tearing Horizon down, but about lifting others up, showing them that 48 or any age was a beginning, not an end. I imagined readers finding hope in my words, as I'd found it in Glennon Doyle's Untamed during my Capitol Hill book club days. One evening, Rachel visited from Seattle, and we met at a Pearl District rooftop bar, the city's lights twinkling below. Over wine, she raised her glass. "To Laura, who turned betrayal into brilliance." I laughed, clinking her glass, but her words sank deep. Brilliance wasn't the standing ovation at the Women in Tech conference, though that had moved me. It was the quiet moments. Maria, the accountant I'd coached, landing a job. Diane, my Horizon colleague, negotiating a raise. The stranger who'd written after my podcast, saying I'd inspired her to start over. Brilliance was my kids, calling me their hero, and my team at Cascade, thriving under my leadership. It was the gratitude jar, overflowing with notes like, "Changed a life today." I thought of my vision board, pinned with Maya Angelou's "Still I Rise," now hanging in my Cascade office. It had guided me through Horizon's darkness, reminding me that rising wasn't about revenge, but about radiance. I'd risen by walking away, by choosing Cascade, by building a life that honored my experience. Boeing's potential move to Cascade, hinted at by Margaret Lee, was a possibility, but my victory didn't depend on it. My power was in the relationships I'd cultivated, the trust I'd earned, the woman I'd become. Horizon had tried to dim my light, but I'd found a stage Portland, Cascade, the world where it could shine. One night, I walked to Waterfront Park, the Willamette River reflecting Portland's glow. I opened my journal and wrote, "The true meaning of revenge is living so fully they can't look away." I thought of the 23-year-old who'd joined Horizon, dreaming of impact, the 48-year-old who'd left, claiming it. I thought of Ellie and Noah, Rachel and Margaret, the women at my book club, the stranger at Chihuly Garden and Glass who'd offered a tissue when I'd cried. The Boeing crisis had forced Horizon to need my relationships, and I'd leveraged that to secure a severance, walking away to become executive vice president at Cascade Partners in Portland's Pearl District. Now, standing on the edge of my journey, I saw revenge not as destruction, but as living fully, thriving authentically, and inspiring others to claim their worth. They'd all been part of my rising. And now, I was part of theirs. My memoir, my podcast, my coaching, they were bridges, connecting me to others, proving that experience was a spark, not a shadow. I looked out at the river, my heart full. I wasn't too old. I was in my prime. My 48 years a foundation for decades of impact. To my readers, I say this. Value yourself, build your network, never let age define you. Your worth is yours, a flame no one can extinguish. Claim it as I did, and watch the world shift. I was Laura Bennett, 48, and my revenge was a life so vibrant, so true, it outshone every doubt. My success was a legacy of love, courage, and unbreakable spirit. Friends, if this call to live fully resonates, share it with someone ready to embrace their prime. Tell me where you're reading from. I never thought I'd share this final reflection, but it's shown me that the truest victory is a life well lived, a light that never fades. This is my story, and it's only the beginning. As I practiced yoga at Alki Beach, the Seattle skyline, a distant memory, I reflected on what I'd learned. At 48, I wasn't too old. I was just getting started. And that was the sweetest victory of all. Revenge, I'd once thought, was about settling scores, about watching Horizon crumble under the weight of their mistakes. They'd dismissed me as too old at 48, handing the vice president of client success role to Sophie, ignoring my decades of loyalty. When I'd left, securing a severance with 3 years' salary and a waived non-compete, I'd heard of their Lesestuo major accounts, a 15% stock drop, James Carter's resignation. But standing in my Portland loft, my gratitude jar glowing with notes of triumph, I felt no urge to gloat. Their downfall wasn't my goal. My revenge was the life I'd built at Cascade, the team I'd empowered, the ripples I'd sent through my family and community. It was the quiet certainty that my worth was mine, not theirs to define. Success, I'd learned, wasn't about titles or corner offices, though my role as EVP at Cascade, with a 50% salary increase, was a sweet validation. It was about impact, about the relationships I'd nurtured over decades, relationships Horizon couldn't take. Margaret Lee, Boeing CEO, had texted about a contract review, her trust in me a bridge to future possibilities. My Silver Expertise initiative at Cascade, pairing veteran and younger employees, had reshaped our culture, earning praise in industry journals. My podcast, Silver Expertise, now with thousands of listeners, carried stories of midlife reinvention, each episode a thread in a tapestry of change. Success was the women at Portland's Women in Tech conference who'd thanked me, the job seekers I'd coached at Portland Community College, the coder who'd called me a mentor. It was Ellie and Noah, watching me rise, learning that courage knows no age. I'd spent years at Horizon believing loyalty to a company was enough, pouring my heart into their empire while missing Ellie's recitals and Noah's games. Their betrayal choosing Sophie, sidelining me, deeming me obsolete had shattered that illusion. But in its place, I'd found a deeper loyalty. To myself, to my values, to the people who saw me. Rachel, my Seattle life coach friend, had been my anchor. Her words, "Own your power," a spark that lit my path. Laura Bennett's story is a tapestry of resilience, reinvention, and redemption, woven through 25 years of triumphs and trials in Seattle's tech world. At 48, a single mother to Ellie and Noah, Laura stood as the cornerstone of Horizon Innovations, her $250 million client portfolio, a testament to her grit and vision. She joined the company at 23, a University of Washington graduate with dreams bigger than her student loans, transforming a scrappy Fremont startup into a regional powerhouse. Laura's reinvention at Cascade Partners in Portland's Pearl District was a radiant second act. As Executive Vice President of Strategic Accounts, with a 50% salary increase, she led a diverse team, launched a Silver Expertise initiative, pairing veteran and younger employees, and secured major accounts. Boeing hinted at following her, their trust unshaken, and her podcast, Silver Expertise, inspired thousands with stories of midlife pivots. She spoke at Portland's Women in Tech conference, earning a standing ovation, and coached job seekers at Portland Community College, helping people like Maria, a 52-year-old accountant, find new paths. Portland became her home, its waterfront park and Columbia River Gorge backdrop to a life of purpose. Ellie and Noah, watching her thrive, drew strength from her courage, with Ellie crediting Laura's example for her internship success. Rachel toasted her brilliance at a Pearl District bar, and even Sophie, via LinkedIn, acknowledged Laura's impact, though Laura let her learn her own lessons. The ripples of Laura's journey reshaped her world. Horizon faltered, losing accounts and James's leadership, a consequence of their short-sightedness. Laura's story, shared through her podcast and planned memoir, Too Old at 48 *, sparked a movement, inspiring women and men to challenge ageism. Her family grew closer, her community stronger, her legacy one of lifting others. At Alki Beach, practicing yoga under a Seattle sunrise, Laura reflected on her mother's words. Never let anyone dim your light. She hadn't. At 48, she was in her prime. Her revenge, not Horizon's ruin, but a life so vibrant it outshone their doubts. Her success was her impact in Ellie, Noah, Margaret, Maria, and countless strangers who saw her rise and found their own. The lesson from Laura's story is profound. Your worth is not defined by others' judgments, but by the courage to claim it, no matter your age or setbacks. In today's fast-paced world, where youth is often glorified and experience undervalued, Laura teaches us to see our years as strength, not weakness. Her journey shows that resilience is built in small acts, writing in a gratitude jar, seeking allies like Rachel, standing firm in negotiations. It reminds us that loyalty to a company must never eclipse loyalty to ourselves, and that walking away from toxicity is not defeat, but victory. Most importantly, Laura's ripples reveal that our choices can inspire others, creating a legacy beyond our own lives. To apply this in 2025, start by valuing your unique expertise, whether you're 18 or 55. Document your achievements, like Laura's journal, to remind yourself of your impact. Build relationships, as she did with Margaret, knowing trust is your greatest asset. If you face dismissal, whether due to age, gender, or circumstance, seek advocates, friends, mentors, professionals like Karen who affirm your worth. Explore new paths, like Laura's move to Cascade, by networking at meetups or online platforms, unafraid to pivot. Share your story through a blog, podcast, or conversation to light paths for others, as Laura's podcast did. And when doubt creeps in, create rituals, a vision board, a walk in your city's heart, like Portland's waterfront park to reconnect with your purpose. Laura's life proves that at any age, you can rise, not just for yourself, but for everyone watching. So, claim your light, let it shine, and watch the ripples change the world. She landed accounts with giants like Boeing and Microsoft, mentored colleagues, and adapted to every industry shift, from HTML to AI, all while raising her children alone after her ex-husband, Mark, left for a freer life. Horizon was her anchor, her identity, the place where she proved her worth until it wasn't. When James Carter, the CEO, chose Sophie Nguyen, a 29-year-old Laura had trained, for the vice president of client success role, citing Sophie's disruptive edge, Laura's world cracked. The rejection, delivered in a sleek Seattle boardroom overlooking the Space Needle, wasn't just a career setback. It was a betrayal of her loyalty, a declaration that at 48, she was too old to lead. The months that followed were a descent into invisibility. Laura's corner office was traded for a shared desk, her clients reassigned to younger managers under Sophie's lead, her voice ignored in meetings. She faced panic attacks in her Capitol Hill apartment, lost weight she couldn't spare, and wrestled with fears of financial ruin, wondering how she'd cover Ellie and Noah's tuition. Yet, even in her darkest moments, Laura found anchors. A gratitude jar filled with notes of small wins, a vision board with Maya Angelou's Still I Rise, a book club reading Untamed that reminded her of her fire. She attended Seattle tech meetups, proposed ideas at work, and sketched plans for a personal branding workshop, refusing to let Horizon's dismissal define her. Her friend Rachel, a life coach, and her lawyer, Karen Voss, bolstered her resolve. But it was Laura's own defiance penned in her journal as, "They can't take my worth," that kept her standing. The turning point came with the Boeing crisis, a $60 million account threatening to walk due to Sophie's missteps. Margaret Lee, Boeing's CEO and Laura's longtime ally, demanded her involvement, exposing Horizon's error in sidelining her 25 years of client relationships. In that moment, Laura seized her power, negotiating a severance package, 3 years' salary, benefits, and a waived non-compete with a boldness honed by betrayal. The 90-minute call with Margaret, where Laura outlined a 3-month transition plan to save the account, was a masterclass in professionalism, securing Boeing's trust while cementing her exit. She resigned immediately, walking out of Horizon's downtown office, past Pike Place Market, her head high, her future hers to shape. The severance was her emancipation, but her true victory was the realization that her value lay not in Horizon's approval, but in the trust she'd built with clients, colleagues, and herself.